Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Pachehra Talks. And today we are going to understand Azure AVD security, how to secure our Azure AVD environment. So let's quickly understand this concept of securing Azure AVD from the various layers that we use in Azure AVD from the various aspects. So let's quickly draw the diagram to understand the concept of securing Azure AVD. So this is our control plane on Azure. These are some services which are managed by the control plane. There are two more, database and broker. And these are our session hosts inside a virtual network. Okay, and let's call him session host 1, 2, and 3. This is our Azure subscription. And let's suppose this is our Azure Active Directory or MS Enter ID, which is linked with our subscription. And here sitting one of our user, so we call it client, who is trying to access our Azure AVD session host. So when this guy try to access session host, right, through control plane, the very first thing it does, it goes to Entra ID and verify itself and provide give the credentials. It will ask for the credentials, right? Credentials. So here, let's start securing it from here. So what is happening here? Here is IAM is something which is happening, identity and access management is happening, and we can secure it here through MFA. We can secure it here through conditional access. We all know what is MFA, we all know what is conditional access, but if we see it from the perspective of zero trust, it will be like verify explicitly, this principle that we are uh, achieving here. And these MFA and CA, like conditional access, not just the credentials, but also verifying through either OTP or authenticator app or anything like that. So it will help us protecting couple of things like we have credential theft. It will protect us from credential theft. It will protect us from phishing attack. It will protect us from unauthorized access. So there are multiple attacks. There's that these things, implementing these things will help us protect. All right. So this is how, if we even think from the defense in depth perspective, this IAM is our first layer, which is identity layer, and which is more important than physical in cloud. So we have to secure it through MFA and conditional access. And next, if we go, let's go to the network layer. Okay. Now this guy is authenticated fine through all those things, and it will access this with all the process that we have discussed in the previous video. But these session hosts are spinned up in the virtual network. So the things that will help us here to protect our session host inside the virtual network. So we are targeting the network layer. So NSGs will going to help us here. Azure Firewall will going to help us here, specifically the outbound internet access for the session host. NSG will help us for the inbound and the outbound traffic, right? And if we talk about from zero trust, these aspects right now, NSG and firewall monitoring, scanning the traffic, is something we can put it in the assume breach principle of zero trust. And if we need to see what actually it is protecting, it is controlling the traffic at the network layer. So we can say here, controlling the traffic at the network layer and preventing unauthorized access, also filtering malicious traffic, filtering. Okay. You can also have particular IPs whitelisted, blacklisted, and other things like that. But these are the few things that it is giving you security from. Now, the network part is also done. Now it's time to think from the session. These session, we need to protect these sessions as well. So let me change the color here, and we can protect this session with the help of, I should write here, MS Defender, right? MS Defender. MS Defender for endpoint, advanced threat protection. And this provide real-time protection and response capability against malware, ransomware, and other threats. And of course, if we talk about zero trust principle here, the zero trust principle would be assume breach, and it is protecting our session host in advance from Microsoft Defender endpoint. Okay. Cool. So we have protected the session host as well. Now, if you remember, this guy is logging sometimes here, sometimes here, sometimes here, and there was something which was solving the problem. That thing was FS logics, right? FS logics. So let's call this Azure files, and we have FS logic containers here. FS logics containers. Okay. Now, the things we need to protect here, what we are protecting here and here is something called data, right? And how can we protect it? We can protect it by encrypting it. Encryption at rest, encryption, encryption at rest and in transit. Uh, the things which are here on the disk can be easily protected with the disk encryption, Azure disk encryption. And on the files, we have SSE, storage encryption. Then we have this, there is something like these are connecting to the session host, right? And this is a PaaS service, so we can also implement private link. We can implement private link here, which will help us to protect it or save it further. Then we can also try, if we think from the zero trust perspective, this could be our least privilege access along with secure private access. And all these things which our cloud admin is managing, we can have Azure RBAC enabled from the IAM perspective. One more thing for the cloud, right? Okay. All right. So this Azure RBAC again will fall under the IAM, Identity and Access Management. This piece we talked from the client perspective, and this piece we are talking from the Azure admin perspective. And all both of these will be applicable there as well, because they have to log into the Azure subscription through MFA and CA, and all the resources that they have access to, they will have the least privileged principle followed through Azure RBAC. Right. So the data got protected, the data on Azure files through SSE, data on disk through Azure disk encryption. Okay. Now, application security, because these session hosts are running applications. So we need to protect applications. How can we protect applications? Through app locker policies, which are configured to allow only approved applications to run. Windows Defender application control adds an extra layer of application security. So we can control the application with the app locker, right? I should write it here. And this will prevent the execution of unauthorized or malicious application, execution of unauthorized and malicious. That's how this app locker will help us protect it. And if we need to talk about zero trust, I would say this will fall under the least privileged again, because everybody is not accessing it. App Locker is locking it down for the privileged users. least privileged access, least privileged access principle, right? Okay, so this app locker can help here. Now, all these things, the network layer, the identity layer, the data layer, uh, and this the application layer here are all protected, but we need to always think assume breach, and hence we should be monitoring it all the time. We should have all those logging enabled through Azure Monitor. So let me call it Azure Monitor here. So this Azure Monitor will gather all the data from here, right? From NSG's firewall and everything from here. So rather it will have all the data coming to Azure Monitor, all the data from everywhere, and uh, the data will be stored under the log analytics. Let me write it down. Azure Monitor will help us monitoring, and analytics will help us analyzing it, alerting it, things like that. And Uh, this log analytics will also be help us to query and visualize the data. So this Azure monitoring and logging practice in the security provides visibility. This provides visibility into the environment and helps detect an anomalous behavior or potential security incident. Anomalies, it will help us to see anomalies, and security incident help us to solve them as well. So if we talk about zero trust, this will treat as an assume breach, right? And these practices, monitoring and logging, will help us figure it out, solve it from where the breach happened, right? So this monitoring and logging enables early detection and response to security incidents, ensuring continuous protection. All right, so I think we are talk enough of the practices. We should also create one more video to specifically talk about session host security practices. Maybe the next video on this, but this is more of a general best practices of Azure AVD environment, from client requesting to have credentials verified till they get the access to the session host. All those points, all those services that get into the flow are protected and secure, right? So we can enable. Let's just quickly summarize and check few implementation step of each and everything that we talked about. For example, MFA and CA, enter ID will take care of that piece. We can simply go to Azure AD security and conditional access, create policies based on location, device compliance, risk levels, things like that. And similarly, we can enforce MFA for all users accessing AVD through Azure AVD security pane of the Enter ID window. If we talk about NSG, we can simply put the NSG through Azure portal, navigate to relevant subnet or network interface where we have to put it there. And Azure Firewall, we need to just enable the UDR so that all the outbound traffic will go through firewall. Endpoint security, we need to onboard session host to Microsoft Defender for endpoint through Azure Microsoft Defender. It's not that tough. It's simply easy. Go ahead and enable it. If we talk about data security, we just need to navigate to the session host disk settings in the Azure portal and enable encryption. We can also use one more thing here that I should mention, which is classify and label sensitive data through Azure information protection of Microsoft information protection. So this will also help us here classifying the sensitive data and protect them accordingly. Then we talked about application security. So we can create app locker policies through group policy or directly on the session host to whitelist the approved applications. We can also use the local security policy editor to configure Windows Defender application control policies there. So we can enable this particular feature for least privileged access and execution of unauthorized access and malicious uh, product or service or anything malicious through app logger. Then monitoring and logging, it's simple. You need to configure Azure Monitor to collect the metrics and logs from your AVD environment and use log analytics to query and analyze the collected data. So that's how you can secure your Azure AVD environment. I hope it was informative and you guys enjoyed learning new things. Thank you for watching and you guys have a wonderful day. Bye bye.